Okay, Gavalti. So yesterday, what we were trying to understand was how you can have a full year go by, yet you don't have 3 Yom Tovim. So the Gemara ended up offering 2 options, or actually 3 options. Option number 1 was according to Reb Shimon that the 3 regalim have to start with Pesach and end with Sukkot. You can have a year go by and you don't have the 3 regalim in the right order. So that was one option. The other option was according to Rebbe, who holds that a year is 365 days, no matter what. Well, then on the Ibriyar, you're going to have, if it's an Ibriyar and the neder was made on Pesach, well, a year later on Pesach, a year later at 365 days later, it won't be Pesach yet because there's an extra month. That was the second shot. And the third shot was Reb Shmaya, who holds that you can have months with different days in it. So Nissan and Iyar can either be 29 days or 30 days. And Reb Shmaya would learn that the 3 regalim we're talking about begins with Shavuos. So if on 1 year, Shavuos was on Hey, Sivan, and the day after Shavuos, on Vav Sivan, you made the neder, it's possible that the next year, Shavuos will be on Zayin Sivan. So by the time a full year goes by, you're still not going to have the 3 regalim. So those were the 3 options that we had, where you can actually have a year go by, and you still don't have 3 regalim. That's where we ended off with yesterday. So we were up to Uman Tana, the Pala Aled Reb Shmaya. Who argues on Reb Shmaya? Reb Shmaya's main point is that it's possible for Nissan and Iyar to have either 30 days or 29 days. Who argues and holds it's always fixed? Acherim holds that the days in each month are always fixed. The Tanya, Acherim Oimrim, Ein Ben Atzeres LaAtzeres, Ein Ben Rosh Hashana Rosh Hashana, Dalad Yom Bildat. What it means is the day Shavuos starts this year will be 4 days later than the day that Shavuos started last year. So if last year Shavuos started on a Sunday, then on the next year Shavuos is going to start Monday, Tuesday. We'll start on a Wednesday. It's always 4 days off. Why is it always 4 days off? Because if you take the 12 months of the year, and 6 months you make Molei, and 6 months you make Chaser, that works out to 354 days in the lunar calendar. So 30 times 6 is 180, and 29 times 6 is 174. And together that works out to 354. 354 is divisible by 7 with a remainder of 4. Because 7 times 50 is 350. And then you have a remainder of 4. So because of that, every year is offset from the year before by 4 days. And if it was a Shana Muberes, which means there was an extra month in it, there was an Adar Beis, which Rashi tells us is always going to be Chaser. Rashi is Kasaver Chodesh Ibor La'olam Chaser. Therefore, Chamisha, then it'll be 5 days off, because if you add 29 days, again, 28 is divisible by 7, and then you have the extra 1, which pushes it off 1 day further. Zok the Heilig Gemara. Boy Reb Zera. Reb Zera had a shayla. Yoresh Mau Bevaltach. So a person makes a neder, he makes a neder to bring a carbon, or he says Haresu Oila, and the son is supposed to fulfill the neder of his father. So the question is, so you might ask right away, why is the son obliged to fulfill the neder of his father? So Tosha says, Yoresh Mau Bevaltacher, the Yoresh Chayav Lahavi. A Yoresh is mechuyev to bring the karbanos of his father. If a woman who has to bring both the chatas and the noila only brought her chatas, but not her oila, her Yoresh would bring her oila. So it goes on. So Tosha speaks about this. So we're assuming that Yoresh has a chiyuv to be makriv the carbon that his father was noider or noider. The question is, will he be subject to the same Baal Ta'achar that his father would have been. Kisider nether Amar Achmon Nada is that Al Tola in the person who made the nether, and this Yerush didn't make the nether, he just got stuck with picking up the pieces. Oidelma, or maybe Uvasa Shama Vavesam Shama. We learned that the mitzvah say to fulfill the nether is when you come to be Oil Regal, you must always bring your Nedavis. Not linked to the fact that you made a nether. Regardless, if you have a responsibility, you must bring it on your first Yom Tov, Hamachai. So that's the Shaila. Since Akiva's here, I want to just thank Akiva very much, because now that we're plugged in, we have very good reception. So thank you very much, Akiva. Tashma. The Tani Rab Chia learned a brayso. It says Me'imcha Prat Li'Irish. So the pasuk says, Kisid Ner L'Hashem L'Chech L'Chach L'Shamay Ki Darish L'Shon Hashem L'Chech Me'imach. Hashem is going to collect it from you, Prat Li'Irish, from you, and not from the Irish. Frankly, Gemara, how could you use Me'imach to exclude the Irish? We already used Me'imach 2 days ago. Behind Me'imach Me'Baylei Zel Leket Shechopeya. We said Me'imach is coming to tell you that there's a Chiyuv, there's an Isser Bal Ta'achar, even on Leket Shechopeya. It's called Me'imach because the Torah uses the word Imach when the Torah discusses the halacha of Leket Shechopeya. So after Gemara, we have 2 available Yiturim, I guess, to darshan from. Karba Imach, the Karba Me'imach. So the extra mem allows us to make an extra drasha. So Ashiz, and therefore with Darish Beitarti, you can extract 2 drushes out of this pasuk. The Imcha Mashma Lei Chelka Shal Ani. So the word Imcha alone would be Marba Leka Chechopeya, and the Mem Yisera is Lamute Yerish. Beautiful. Boy Abzer declares a Shaila. How about an Isha? Mahi Beval Ta'achar. Is an Isha over Baal Ta'achar? Mi Amrina, do you say Haloi Mechayve Beria? A woman does not have a chiyuv to be Oila Regel. And clearly, we've seen that the Isra Baal Ta'achar is linked very closely to the Sholosh Pa'amim B'Shan La Yirah Kol Zechorcha. Mi Amrina Hal Mechayve Beria, Zok Rashi. Tichsiv Kol Zechorcha. Males have to go to be Oila Regel. The chiyuv Loi Mechayve La Mesak, since a woman does not have a chiyuv to be Oila Regel, Loi Shayach was man Regolim Baal Ta'achar. Regolim isn't something that's relevant to her, Lagabi Baal Ta'achar. Or maybe on the flip side, Ha'isa b'simcha, she's still included in the mitzvah of simcha. This is an interesting point. Rashi says, so since she also is a chiv of simcha, and therefore she also is a chiv to bring karbanas, maybe that should include her in the envelope of the chiyuv of Baal Ta'achar. Morning. Zok to Gemara. Amar le Abaye, v'teipa kalei de Isa b'simcha. So Abaye said, maybe we should say that she should shtaka b'chayiv because she's Isa b'simcha. Frank the Gemara, Amar Abaye hachi. Did Abaye actually hold that a woman is mechuyev in the simchas of Yom Tov? Abaye said that there's no mitzvah for a woman to eat karbonis, which would then include her in the chiyuv of Baal Ta'achar. Rather, Baila Masabcha, which Rashi says means in Bavel, the big with colorful begadim. I guess that was the style there. And Be'eretz Yisrael, the big pishin, some nice, clean pressed white linen. Hachis of the kedushin. So that's the chiyuv. So there's no chiyuv for her to eat shalmi simcha. And the chiyuv is for her husband to make her happy on Yom Tov. And if that's the case, how could Abai suggest that that's the reason why she should be mechuyev in the Isra Baal Ta'achar? So their Abzer Kamar. Abai says, according to me, Avada, there shouldn't be any reason for her to be mechuyev in Baal Ta'achar. But you Abzera, who hold, we're at the bottom of the base. But you Abzera, who hold that there isn't in Simcha for a woman, you should hold that she should be mechuyev in the Isra Baal Ta'achar. Let's see Toysvis. Isha Baal Masam. Appears Bekundris. The Bavel bebegodim tzabayim, uberetz Yisrael b'chlei pishtanam hagohatzim kedisha b'kedusha. The kashal or Rebbeinu Tam. Frankly, Rebbeinu Tam, this doesn't make any sense. Tahani mili bizman hazeh. This whole halacha that by the mesamcha is bizman hazeh where there are no more karbanis. Avu bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim ein simcha ela bebasar kedamrina be'arbi psachim, like it says in the Gemara psachim. V'oy damrin perakami dechagiga Who's a cotton? Someone who can't hold his father's hand, and walk up with his father from the city of Yerushalayim to the Harabais. Adhacha man, let's see the base. Adhacha man, I say. So who brings him? Dr. Gemara, Umashani Adhacha Machayve Ime Besimcha. Mashma, she's a kuka lalois, mishum shalmi simcha. So you see from the Gemara there that even a woman, b'shas the Beis Hamikdash, had a chiyuv to come up to Harabayis and eat from the shalmi simcha. It doesn't mean that she has no chiyuv to eat meat. Like Rashi says, the Ben Tam says, even though she's going to eat meat, but it's not her responsibility, it's her husband's responsibility to prepare that for her. Therefore, she shouldn't be included in the chiyuv of like we said earlier, which is the mitzvah to say to be mechayiv someone to bring their carbon on time.
If I understand this correctly, Rabbeinu Tam is saying that the saying or the rule of Ein Simcha El B'Basar is only being applied to korbanos.
That's exactly what that's saying. The Gemara says that.
Today, when somebody says Ein Simcha El B'Basar by Yom Tov, it's not true. We don't have that simcha that we're talking about.
It's not that a sense of simcha of bringing the carbon son. That's right. Right. Because there's up to Gemara right there. And in fact, that's why nowadays, for women, the Gemara says, the simcha is to buy them nice clothing. Now, the simcha, the simcha that a woman might be mechuyev in would be the shlomim. But under shlomim, you're better off buying your wife beautiful clothing. But men, I think, always like basar. For men, it's always simple basar.
I never knew that. I always thought Ein Simcha El B'Basar.
It just means good rib steak.
On Shabbos or on Yom Tov. I mean, on Yom Tov.
We learned many times that for men, that's the simcha.
We learned a Rashi before that. Rashi did not seem to say that it was only by korbanos. I remember seeing such a Rashi somewhere.
Yeah, no, we learned that, but that's for men, not for women.
Oh. So for women, the Ein Simcha El B'Basar. Oh, so that's what we're saying? We're saying Ein Simcha.
When the Beis Hamikdash was kaim for the women, there was also the simcha for the shalmei simcha. But stam meat doesn't do anything for them. They'd rather have a nice baguette.
And then okay.
That's why I understood it. Akiva, thank you very much. It worked perfectly. I'm sorry I couldn't respond last night, but Iboilu, Bechor, a Bechor, me Mosai Moinin Loi Shana. A Bechor is a behemoth that's born, it's a firstborn. So the halacha is you have to bring it. If it doesn't have a mum, you have to bring it as a carbon. If it has one, you give it to a kohen. So when do you start counting the year? In other words, the question is, do you count it from the time that it's born? From the moment that it's born, even though you can't bring it as a carbon when it's born, because we know you can't bring a carbon until an animal is 8 days old. Only after it's 8 days old. And this would have a huge nafkamina if there was a Yom Tov in between these 2 8 days, right? Especially if there was a Yom Tov in between 2 8 days, it would make a huge difference of several months. But it's not a machlekes between Abaye and Rabbi Yaakov. They both agree. Habatam, Bayatam Zok Rashi, the koi lahartza, Mishanir lahartza. And a tam which is going to be brought as a carbon, so it's going to have to wait the 8 days till it's right to be brought. So then the clock should only start ticking at the time where the animal is right to be brought as a carbon, which is when it's 8 days. Oh, I just lost my screen. 1 second. Let's connect again. Okay. But when Abaye said Mishash Noilad, it's referring to a balmum. So Rashi, Shenoilad b'mumad, it was born with its mum, and the moment it was born, it was already known that it would not be a carbon. So therefore, Miyom Shenoilad, Huroyu Lakach, from the moment it was born, it's Royu, therefore, which is mashma, that if it was born without a mum, and then they got a mum during the 8 days, Avada, the clock starts ticking only after it's 8 days old, and that's what Tosfos says. Haba balmum may occur. We're talking about a behemoth that was born with a mum. The tam v'nasa balmum, if it was born a tam, which means when it was born, it was destined to be brought as a carbon. And then during the 8 days, it became a balmum. Since at the time that it was born, it couldn't have been eaten right away. Therefore, you treat it like a carbon because right away the start date gets pushed off. Since when it was born, it was ready for a carbon. Beautiful. Let's see the Gemara weiter. How could you eat a balmum within 8 days? Rashi. You can't eat a balmum. If a behemoth is born as a mum, you can't eat it the day it's born because you see it as a mum. So there's a problem with it. Maybe it's an animal that's not well. And therefore, until you wait 8 days to make sure that it's going to survive. If it survives 8 days, it's no longer a nefel. The Tanya Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Eimer, Kol sheshosh shloishim yom ba'adam ein nefel, u'bebehemoth shmoni yom. A behemoth that lasts 8 days, an animal can accomplish in 8 days what it takes a human 30 days to do. So an animal establishes itself as not a nefel in only 8 days. So you can't eat it for 8 days. So why did you start counting so early? The kimle bay shekalu chadasha. It's speaking where it's not the type of mum where we assume it's going to die. In other words, we know it was a full-term pregnancy, and the animal is fine except for a small mum that just makes it partial to a carbon. But avada, it's royal achila right away, and therefore it'll be about the achar legabe giving it to the kohen. Gewaltig. Dr. Gemara weiter. Actually, Tosfos speaks out. It's not also giving to the kohen. It has to be eaten within the year. Taner Rabban. Be'echad b'Nisan. The first day of Nissan is Rosh Hashana l'Chadash. Now, our Mishnah doesn't say this. So we have a brisa that's adding features to Rosh Chodesh Nissan that our Mishnah doesn't discuss. So Be'echad b'Nisan, Rosh Hashana l'Chadash. What does Rosh Hashana l'Chadash mean? Rashi leminyan chachi Hashana. Counting the months, you count from Nissan. Nissan is the first month. Ule Iburin. Rashi says at this point the Gemara thinks because Halkadaitach. When do Bezdin convene to determine if the next year should be an Ibayar? In Nissan. Ula Truma Shkolim. Truma Shkolim, we learned that in Adar, they start collecting Shkolim, which are going to pay for the communal karbanos. So it says, on Echad Ben Nissan, Truma Shkolim, Rishon Lahakriv Karbanos Halakuchim. So what they would do is they would have a big lishka full of all the different coins, all the chmachta shekels that were given. And when did they start buying karbanos with the new batch of money that came in from this year? They do it they start in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's when they start taking from the new thing. It's very interesting because our governments are spending money that's going to be collected in 20 years. Right? But in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they were ahead of the game. They still had money left over from the previous cycle, yet, come Rosh Chodesh Nishan, the time has arrived to start taking from the fresh gold. They ran a surplus, yeah. It was very well managed. So it's funny, you have this woman, I forgot what her name was, from that Mishpach of Khan, Lucas, as Mata Asim Mechala, she was probably a liberal who has deficit budgets forever and ever with no hope to ever get it under control. And she's complaining about the Beis HaMikdash that was meticulously financially managed that they waste money.
Why do you make her a liberal? Because she's a Rosh.
Right. V'yesh Oimrim, Af l'schiris batim, she also married out, so she thinks that things equal.
Did you know the Lubavitcher Rebbe's vort on that? Did you say that over?
No.
Did I hear it somewhere else?
What was the Lubavitcher Rebbe's vort?
That Akiva shared it. Akiva can say it better than I can say it.
It just seems it's a negative story. It's Lashon Hara on Miriam Haspilka. This is what the Gemara wants to say. You have to look at it.
And end of a Masechta with it.
Married out, and she's so far removed from Yiddish. It troubled her to see the Yidden in the difficult spot. Push comes to shove, look what happened. This is
Yeah.
really this big.
Yeah, I hear, yeah. And,
Not even to put her down, it's really to elevate.
but she was still a liberal. She was still a liberal.
When she married out,
She was
right?
banging on the Mizbeach with a Ferragamo
You're
shoe.
liberal, the second, it's so far removed, but the essence of the.
I hear. Ayid still cares. Yep. Very nice.
This is the
Shkoyach Hadik.
ideology of suffering Lubavitch.
Okay, so let's see the Gemara right. Apropos. Okay, V'yesh Oimrim. Thank you. V'yesh Oimrim. Af l'schiris batim. Also for schiris batim. What does schiris batim mean? Rashi says hamaskir bayis lechaveri. If you rent your house to somebody, v'omer l'shana zu, and you say I'm renting it to you for this year. Well, when is year end? Zok Rashi kol sheshnasa bechad v'nitzon. Whenever you rent for a year, we always consider the year as Nissan. So even if you're in the middle of the year, even if on Rosh Chodesh you say I'm renting you the house for the year, Rosh Chodesh Nissan, the year is over. That's year end. Zok Gemara. So now we're going to drill down to understand the Brisa better. Where do you know that the first month we count as Nisan, which we always do? Where do you get that from? The Chsivit says, Rosh Chodashim. This is in the parashas of Yitzis Mitzrayim. Achodesh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei Hashana. It's the first month for you of the year. Dabru el kol adas Yisrael leimar. Speak to the stada of Klal Yisrael. The Esher l'chodesh hazeh on the 10th day of Nisan. V'yikcha lachem ish selaveis avos selabayis. The hoya lachem l'mishmeres adar bas. Yom l'chodesh hazeh, and you should save it and watch it until you make Bikkur until the 14th day, until Erev Pesach, V'shachtu Ois. So, HaChodesh Zalachem, we don't know yet that it's Nisan, right? It just says it's this month will be Rosh Chodashim. We still have to figure out how do we know this is Chodesh Nisan. So Rashi says, HaChodesh Zalachem, we know on the Nisan. How do we know this is a Nisan? Because they were on the 10th day of that month, they took a set for their Korban Pesach. And there's another passage that says, Shapesach B'Chodesh Av. So we need a lot of pieces of information to make this raya work. The Torah calls it the first month. The Torah says it's Pesach time, but we still don't know when that is. So the next passage tells us that places this month in the spring. Shamar is Chodesh Ha'aviv. So you see that the pasuk of Pesach is referring to the season of Aviv. And if you look at the pasuk inside the base, it's clear that that's Shamar as Chodesh Ha'aviv. He's a Pesach L'Shem Alakech. So we know Pesach has to be in the spring. Pesach is in the month that the Torah calls B'Chodesh Harishon, and that's how we know that it's Nisan. Zok to Gemara, Shemor Chodesh Aviv, Ezel Chodesh Yesh by Aviv, which is the month that has Aviv in it. And what is the definition of Aviv? Rashi says Shatfua Bechirabay. The Tfua matures and ripens. It ripens. So Gemara, Havayim is Nisan. Nisan is the month where the winter wheat starts to or finishes to ripen. The Karil Rishon, and you see that the Torah calls it Rishon. In fact, Gemara Ve'ema Ir, who said it's exactly Nisan? Maybe it's a little later. Maybe it's Ir, where all the fruits are already ripened. So Gemara Be'ina Aviv Eleka, which means Shekfar Nigmara Minisan. So Ve'ema Adar. Gemara Be'ina. So Ve'ema Ir Be'ina Aviv Eleka. So actually, Be'ina Aviv Eleka Shekfar Nigmara Minisan. It already became fully ripened in Nisan. And therefore, in Iyar, it's not Chodesh Aviv where things do ripen, because things have already ripened. So therefore, it can't be referring to Chodesh Iyar. Because Arafela ain't a Bechir Elav. And if you have certain products that were very, very late, that's not called Bechir. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says weiter. Ve'ema Adar. So maybe it's a month before. In Adar, surely things are beginning to ripen. You need most of the ripening to occur. Sure, there might be some early wheat that are going to ripen, but the bulk of the ripening occurs in Nisan. There'll be things that start ripening in Adar. So tomorrow you need roiv aviv, so you roiv to voice misbaker's play. So Chodesh Nisan is the month where most of the crop ripens. Zoktimar weiter. Midi roiv aviv ksiv. It says b'chodesh aviv. It doesn't say that roiv of the pears have to ripen there. So that maybe it doesn't mean Adar, where there's the beginning stages of ripening. We have to abandon this raya. We're going to go to a different raya. It says, "Ach b'chamisha asa yom l'chodesh hashvi, v'as bechem es tvuas haaretz." So this, of course, is referring to Sukkot. On the 15th day of Tishrei, which we don't know clearly what it is, but the Gemara is going to drill down, when you gather your tefillah, Ezer chodesh sheyesh bo yasif, which is the month where we gather things in. Rashi says, "Shemachnisin by Paris lebayis mipnei hagshamim." You had your Paris sitting out all summer to dry, and now you need to bring it inside to protect it from the rain. And all summer long, you left your grain in piles to dry out. So which is that month? Tishrei. That's Tishrei. The Torah calls the month of Tishrei the 7th month. So if you count back, Nissan will be the 1st month. So that's how you do it. Who said it's in Tishrei that you're gathering? Maybe in Cheshvan you're gathering. Uma Shvi Le'ir. And maybe it's the 7th month from Ir, which means Ir would be the 1st month. You need that you gather there. And you're not gathering there. It's already gathered in by the time Cheshvan comes. Maybe it's the month before Tishrei. And maybe Adar is then the 1st month. You need that most of the gathering into the pair should occur in that month, and that doesn't happen in Adar. That doesn't happen in El. It happens in Tishrei.
Don't we have the pasuk that says Chodesh Hazeh Yer Rosh?
It does, but what month is that?
Chodesh Hazeh, we're talking about a year. And we're talking about Nissan.
How do you know?
The Bnei Yisrael went down to Nissan.
It was Rosh Chodesh Nissan when he was
But how do we know that?
How do we know that we went out in Rosh Chodesh Nissan?
Yeah, how do we know? How do we know that that the month that the pasuk is talking about is Nissan? So we have to use Chodesh. The Gemara tried using Chodesh Aviv, and that didn't work. So we're still trying to place Pesach. We haven't placed what month Pesach is in it.
Don't we have a tradition of when we receive that first Rosh Chodesh?
The question is, we have the Messiah.
Yeah.
The Gemara wants to prove it. The Gemara wants to prove it from the Psukim, beyond Messiah. The Gemara could say that. Well, that's what we always do. But the Gemara wants to prove it from a pasuk.
Normally called the Sarah.
So the Gemara wants to prove it from a pasuk. So the Gemara, the same question that we had before. Maybe Midi Rav So who said that it's referring to Tishrei? Maybe it's referring to El. El Amaravina. El Amaravina, and you're gonna like this there. It's we're not able to prove from Psukim, in fact, that that's the case. Rather, Medivra Kabbalah, which really would be Messiah, because you don't learn halachas from Kabbalah, you just learn customs from Divra Kabbalah. And it says in the Navi, let's see where this pasuk is, in Dalid. This pasuk is in Zechariah. It says, "V'yoim esrim ba'arba la'ashtei asher chodesh hu chodesh Shvat." The 24th day of the 11th month was Shvat, which means the 12th month is Adar, which means the 1st month is Nisan. That's how we know it. Rabbi Bar Ula Amar Mehacha. It says, "Vatilachach Esther el Hamelach Achashverosh al Beis Malchusai v'chodesh Asiri," the 10th month hu chodesh Teves. So once again, if Teves is month 10, then Nisan is month 1. Kahana Amar Mehacha from a different pasuk.
That's not a good pasuk because that Esther Malka was going in the Persian custom.
No, they named the months. Yeah.
It's Teves.
Doesn't matter what the month is, but maybe their Tavis is different than our Tavis. Maybe their Nissan.
The Gemara Vais the Chosh assumes that's not. The Gemara assumes that it's a riot. So you can have a riot from this Gemara that even in Shushan, the Torah refers
Which is interesting. Because even though we took their name, even though we took the names of their mom, who says that their name corresponded with
I hear.
So they had, before that, they had no riots. Is that what you're saying? They didn't have a riot from a pasuk until all of Bayis Rishon, there was no riot.
No, so Dr. Phillips said that we knew we had a custom. There was a custom, right? We knew it was always Nissan.
Yeah, but we had no riot. No
Right,
riot.
right. And all the riot in the Navi is it's recorded history that was the custom, but it's it's not the Torah telling us that. We know it from Messiah, and to prove that there's such a Messiah is you see that was the custom in all these places in Navi.
You mentioned where the names of the month came from?
No.
This was called something else.
Uh-huh.
No, it was called Chodesh Harishon.
They
But
only had numbers. I think they only had numbers.
no, we as Eden only had numbers. But Esther, Taka might have only been saying HaChodesh Hazeh. I'm sorry, the Nisan was the 1st month for us. It might not have been the 1st month for them.
I don't know what they're going to for process. Yeah.
No, meaning in Achashverosh, it might there's no right that it was for them, but for us, it definitely is.
Uh-huh. So let's do the Gemara says
How
weiter.
did the Goyim have lunar months? Did they put in an extra either year as well?
You mean the guy that used the lunar calendar?
Well, in Persia, if they had the same.
I don't know what they did.
months, they must have had a every year if they kept the seasons the same.
Maybe they did, yeah.
Before, Tishrei.
So let's do the Gemara weiter.
Persia.
So let's do the Gemara weiter. Reb Kahana Amar Mehach. There's a very interesting historical facts to know how these things worked in those days. So
Maybe since they were all mixed up all the time. That's what happened. And they didn't understand how-
Isn't the raya that Nissan Pesach has to be in Aviv, right?
Correct.
Pesach is in Nissan, so doesn't that dictate that it has to
No,
be?
because Pesach maybe Adar is also of it. Things start to ripen. That was the Gemara.
The earliest, but the earliest month that can be spring is the month after the equinox, right? Or the month that includes the
That's not what
equinox.
the Gemara says. The Gemara here says you don't have a raya because it's since some pears begin to ripen, and all the Torah says like Pesach is over. The Torah doesn't say anything about the equinox. The Torah says
Yeah,
of it.
But Pesach can't be before the equinox. That's the limiting factor.
Right, but there's no pasuk that says that. The Chazal wants to make it that. Once we know that Pesach is supposed to be in the spring, so they adjust Adars to make sure it's always in the spring. But that's not a proof that the first month of the year is Nissan, and it's not a proof that Pesach is in Nissan. Maybe Pesach is in the year, and the first month is here. But we need to know that.
I think we get to it later anyway. Okay.
Okay, so let's see what happens. On the fourth day of the 9th month, the Kislev. So once again, if Kislev is identified as month 9, so Nisan is month 1. Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha, Hipel Pur, Hu Agoyr, Lef Nehaman, Yom Liyoim, Michaydesh, Lechaydesh, Neimasar, Hu Chaydesh Ad. So we have a whole bunch of psukim that give the number of different months, and through counting, we can figure out where Nisan fits it. So Zok Gemara, V'chulu my taima lo amri mehai. We finally have a pasuk that directly addresses Chodesh Nisan as being Chodesh Rishon. The Chodesh Rishon, the Chodesh Nisan. So all these other mandam who brought psukim, bringing rice from different places, why didn't they just stick to the pasuk that directly addresses Chodesh Nisan? So Gemara, Dilma my Rishon, Rishon lemil say. Maybe over there when it says Chodesh Rishon, it's not referring to the first month of the year, of the calendar year. Maybe it's Rishon lemil say and Rashi l'maisa haman. Maybe the Chodesh Nisan over there in the Megillah was the first month after this big incident. You don't know that it means Chodesh Rishon in the classic meaning that it's the first month that we count for the months of the year. And what about Tana Didan? Why didn't our Tana ever say that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Rosh Hashanah l'Chadashim? Why didn't they mention it? The Gemara, Rishonim Kamari b'Chadashim like Kamari. Our Tana is talking about things related to the year, not things related to the month. And therefore, our Tana didn't discuss the fact that Nisan is the first month counted. That wasn't the scope of what the Tana wanted to share. Okay, the next word of the Brayso is Li'iburin. On Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we do Iburin. So, Li'iburin, Minisa Maninan, are you telling me that Bezdin convenes on Rosh Chodesh Nisan to decide that the next year should be an Ibr Yor? But Tanya we learned, Ein Ma'abrin Hashana Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. You're not allowed to make an Ibr Yor before Rosh Hashanah. So Nisan is long before Rosh Hashanah. V'mebrua, and even if they did so, Ein Mu'beres, it will not work. If there's an issue that there's going to be a problem, they could add a month right after Rosh Hashanah. So let's see what Rashi says. They don't analyze it to tell people that we're adding a month. So when are they going to add a month? In Adar. If they talk about it so early, people are going to forget by the time Adar comes. If they're afraid that if they wait, there might be a gzeira that will not allow the bezin to convene. Or the nasi is not available, I guess. And you need the nasi's approval. So then, you can do it. You can do it right after Hashana, even though Tishrei to Adar is still a long time and people might forget. But even though we're going to allow you to make the decision earlier, the only month that you can double is the month of Adar. So the only year you ever add is Adar. The only month you ever add. This is what Victor was referring to. The reason why we add Adar is because Adar is right before Nissan, and we want Pesach to be past the equinox. We want it to be in the spring, so we'll use the month beforehand to adjust it. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my ibur. So the question is, sorry?
Count straight as well. You can add one at the end, but if you add one in the middle,
It mixes it up. That's right. That's right. It's a good point. So the problem is you can't say that Bezdin convene on Rosh Chodesh Nissan because in fact they can't. So what's pshat on the Mishnah? My iburin hafsakas iburin. What it means is that's the deadline. Once Rosh Chodesh Nissan comes, they can no longer decide to add another. So the moment they were Mekadosh Rosh Chodesh Nissan, Haska Shana, the year is over. You can't go back and adjust it. You can't make adjusting entries. So over Milia is Muberesai. You can no longer be Muberes. They can't make Nissan, which they were already Mekadosh, into a second Adar. As far as Ibur is concerned, we passed year. Ditnan. Hein Eidu. Rabbi Shua and Papai said Eidus. All the month of Adar, you could add another. If Rashi's of Bezin saw a need to. However, so they used to say Arapurim. They would say Arapurim. So it's not Rashi. There were people who were saying that you cannot be Ma'abir Chodesh after Purim, and they said no. We saw that Bezin was Ma'abir Chodesh up until the end of the month. Why? Why did they say Ad Purim? What's the reason? What's the reason why Purim would be the deadline? Since 30 days before Pesach, you start handling in Pesach, and therefore, once Purim passes, it's already 30 days before Purim and then before Pesach, and everybody's going to be at Angaton in Pesach, and then suddenly they say, you changed their mind. It's going to cause a zilzul because here they're going full speed ahead, and then boom, everything stops. Rashi says, we're already in full Pesach mode. So everybody's under the impression that at the end of the 30 days from Purim, it's going to be Pesach. And if suddenly Bezin says, sorry, we changed plans, they're not going to listen. How could you tell me that Pesach is not in 30 days? That Hashanah spoke already. Everyone's talking about it already. We don't believe you, and it's going to end up. They're going to end up keeping the wrong Pesach. And what about the Shita who holds that you're allowed to be Ma'aber Chodesh until the end of the year? Made the idea, people know that there's calculations that have to be made, and sometimes they're made at the last minute. And therefore, the Savri no one's going to be Mizalzel. They'll say the information that they had, they were watching the pairs. There's a lot of different reasons why, what they use. There's like 3 different reasons what they use to be Ma'aber. One of them is to make sure the pairs are going to ripen, so there should be pairs for Pesach. So they were monitoring the situation and they couldn't come to a conclusion until later. That will not cause a zilzul. Why didn't our Tana mention that Rosh Chodesh Nissan is also Rosh Hashana Libuin? So the Mishnah is only discussing things that begin on Rosh Chodesh Nissan, not deadlines that expire Rosh Chodesh Nissan, and we're talking about a deadline to be able to be Ma'aber Deshan. How do you know that the Truma Shkolim have to be taken, the new Shkolim, the carbonates that are brought from Chodesh Nissan and on, have to come from the new budget? It says, Zois Oilash Chodesh B'Chodshoi L'Chodshei Hashana. Zok the Gemara. How do we dash this pasuk? Amar Torah Chadesh V'Havei Karban V'Truma Chadasha. The Zois Oilash Chadash B'Chodshei Hashana. We want to bring the So Rashi Chache Yisrael Ladrasha. The extra Chache, Lachache Hashana, is darshaning that you should be Chadesh, you should take from the new budget. The Gamri we learned, Shana Minisan. It says Lachache Hashana, and we learned the word Shana there from the word Shana by Nisan. The Chsev Rishanu Lachem Lachache Hashana. So that's how we know that it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan that we start taking from the new budget. So again, the pasuk says take from the new budget in a certain month, and the way we know which month it is because we have Exer Shava Shana Shana. In fact, the Gemara of a Ligmar Shana Shana mi Tishrei, we have a word Shana by Tishrei as well. So maybe you should take on Tishrei from the Truma Chadasha. Chsev Mereishis Hashana. So the Gemara done in Shana Sheyeshima Chadasha mi Shana Sheyeshima Chadasha. In the pasuk of Nissan, it says Rishon Lachem Lachache Hashana. It uses the word Chodesh and the word Shana, just like it uses Zoy Shalosh Chodesh B'Chache Lachache Hashana. Masha'enkein, the pasuk that we're bringing from Tishrei only says Shana, doesn't say Chodesh. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Karbonis Tibur Haboin Bechad B'Nisan. Karbonis Tibur that you start bringing on Echad B'Nisan. Mitzvah Lahavi Min HaChadosh. The mitzvah is to bring it from the Truma Chadash. From Heavy Min HaYashin. If you took from the old budget, Yosy, you still be Yotze. Elashachisa Mitzvah, you lost the mitzvah because the Torah is telling you you're supposed to take from the Truma Chadash. Tanya Nami Haki, we learned as well. Karbonis Tibur Haboin Bechad B'Nisan. Karbonis Tibur that come on the first day of Nisan. Mitzvah Lahavi Min HaChadosh. And heavy min hayashan yatsa ela shechisa mitzvah. A yachid should not of mishaloi. A yachid that gave his own nedava, sharing its kosher. So what if a yachid gave his own money into the truma? We know everything has to be communal. So can I put extra money into the communal pot? So it would be kosher as long as he gives it totally over. And if you remember, at the time we learned this Gemara, we discussed there was a shayla of kahanim are mechuyev, and the Gemara said kahanim are mechuyev, but there are certain tanoim who said the Kohanim were not mechuyev, and they were kahanim, they were trying to protect their own. But everybody agreed that if the Kohen gives it and he gives it with the ganze heart, it won't be considered personal. It'll be blended into the communal, because it cannot be any personal type of money inside this pot, because it's going to mess up the carbon cheaper. Pegmar pshita. So it's pashut that if he gives it over completely, it should be considered communal. But no, mild tema leichush shema loy yimser mutziver yafa yafa. Maybe he's not going to give B'leif Shalom. Rashi says, Kamash Malon, that you could rely that he's going to give it Yafa Yafa. Again, the Tana did done. Why didn't our Tana mention that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is also Rosh Chodesh Rosh Hashana L'Truma Chadasha? That's from Even the Ketani Im Hebi Yatza, since the halacha is that even if you brought from the Truma Yashana, you'll be Yotza, Loi Psikalei. Therefore, the Tana didn't want to mention, because he only wants to mention things that are complete cutoffs. Rashi says, maybe Yotza like psikalei milsa the lechshev of Rosh Hashanah. It's not if the evidence good, that's not a real cutoff. That's not enough to qualify as a Rosh Hashanah. The Yesharim Avlas Chiris Bottom, there are those who say that Nissan is also the year end when it comes to a rental contract. Tadraban Maskabayis lechaveiroi lishana. If someone says, "I'm renting you my house for the year," the halach is minus shneimas chodesh miyayim liyayim. The first time that holds, it's 365. It's not 365. It's 354 days. It's 12 months from day to day. The Amar Lashana Zu, but if he says I'm renting it, so if I say I'm renting it to you for a year means 12 months. But if I say I'm renting it to you for this year, then even if this arrangement was made, this deal was made in the first day of Adar, it's only a month till the end of this year. Even also Lashana, it's a year, and you got to vacate. Even if you hold so if it's be'echad ba'adar, then it'll be good. But if it's less than echad ba'adar, if it's less than a month, then clearly he couldn't have meant I only want it till Nissan, because nobody would bother entering into a rental agreement for less than 30 days. Let's see Rashi. But less than the full month of Adar, I'm reading also Leshana. There, everybody agrees that the rental contract did not mean just until the end of the year. And in that circumstance, if it was on the second day of Adar that they made this deal, he can stay there for a full year. You can't argue that the renter and both the owner and the renter had in mind only till the end of the month. No one's going to bother renting a house for such a short amount of time. Take the Gemara of Emi Tishrei. How do you know that Masker buys the year end is Nissan? Maybe the year end is Tishrei. So Gemara Stam ki Agar Inish Beisa L'chulu Yemoisa Geshamim Agar. Nobody is going to want to vacate in Tishrei, which is right before the winter. So Grash of Emi Tishrei, Hashana L'Schiris Bata. Maybe that's what it is. Even Shigiyah Tishrei also Hashana. Maybe if you on Rosh Hashanah say I want it for the year, maybe you have to move out on Tishrei. So tomorrow, no. If he's renting a house before Tishrei, clearly he wants to be there for the whole winter. Nobody wants to move out in the middle of the muddy winter. The Tanakama, the Brisa, the Brisa who holds it's always a year. The Tana Didan and our Tana.
Based on convenience and
on what people do, yeah. A rental agreement is based on what you expect the understanding of the parties to be. We're interpreting what they probably meant. If you specified, even though it's the winter, I still want to move out, that's a different story. But we're talking about a stam rental contract, and you say for a year, you definitely don't want to move out on Tishrei. That's definitely not here.
But the year is from the date I decide. You're just telling me that.
No, according to Shita, if you want to argue that Rosh Hashanah, if you want to argue that the Rosh Hashanah for the Rosh Hashanah for Schiris Batan is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, if you would want to argue that, and on Rosh Chodesh El, I came over to you and said, I want to rent your house for this year, we assume that for this year means until the end of this year, until Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. But so Dr. Gemara, I'm sorry? Yeah, because this year, until the end of this year, and since this year ends in Tishrei, it means a month. That's what the Gemara says with Nissan, right? The Gemara says, Allah Lamaisa. If you come in Adar, or Rosh Chodesh Adar, and you say, I want it for this year, your rental expires in 1 month. That's what the Gemara says. But if you did the same thing on Rosh Chodesh, let's say I want it for this year, even on the Havamina, we don't blah blah, but even on the Havamina, that Tishrei will be the year end, there we don't say he's planning to move out on Tishrei, because we know nobody wants to move out in the winter. Everybody wants to be set for the winter. The Tana Didan, so the Tana Kama the Braisa, who doesn't say this, and our Tana who doesn't list it off as Afal Shchiris Batim, is B'Nissan Nami Mishkach Shchir Kitri. Nissan also writes of a miskashin b'gsham yardim. People don't want to move out on Nissan either. So therefore, he disagrees with the fact that Nissan is considered the end of the year. Okay, I guess we'll stop here.